Rahima Khatun, she's telling me that her husband and her nephew were hacked to death in front of her.
In my 18 years of practice, I have not seen a single patient with tuberculosis. And there, in one day, I saw 4 patients.
Welcome to all of you. I'm Margaret Brennan. I'm the host of Face the Nation on CBS. And thank you. I am very excited to introduce you. To these 2 extremely brave women tonight. They're with us and making sure that what is taking place against the Rohingya people is not forgotten, by bearing their firsthand witness to this humanitarian crisis, which the Trump administration did officially recognize this past year as ethnic cleansing. Now, with me, Dr. Fozia Alvi is a doctor in Canada who has spent several weeks working in the Rohingya refugee camps. And Tania Rashid is a Bangladeshi-American journalist and foreign correspondent for PBS NewsHour. Last September, at the height of the exodus, she spoke with the refugees as they arrived to Bangladesh on boats or on foot after walking through the jungle. She leaves tomorrow for her latest reporting trip to Myanmar, or Burma, as it's also known. So Tania, I want to start off with you. Because they are an ethnic minority, many people don't really understand who the Rohingya people are. In fact, some officials in Burma and Myanmar deny that they even exist as a people. Can you explain who they are and why neither Bangladesh nor the government in Burma or Myanmar accept them or recognize them?
The Rohingyas are a Muslim minority group that have existed in Myanmar for centuries. The problem is that there is a deep hatred amongst the Myanmar major population against them because of their religion. Myanmar is a Buddhist-dominant country, and because of this hatred and calling them illegal Bengalis, they have led a series of attacks, brutal rapes, murders of innocent people, hundreds and thousands of them, which has led to a recent attack in August of 2017, where an insurgency group, part of the Rohingya community, had to protest. And the Myanmar government is far stronger than the Rohingyas, and in retaliation, they did a counterinsurgency campaign where they murdered and raped hundreds and thousands of women. And when I stood at the border, I was there moments after it happened, and I witnessed majority women and children coming in boats with no food or water for 14 or 15 days, and stories of horror in front of me.
And from what you've seen, this is insurgent groups getting mixed in with civilians, that civilians are being treated as fair targets. And in fact, what you're describing is beyond ethnic cleansing in many ways. You're talking about rape as warfare. You've seen and witnessed many, many things.
It's a systematic act of annihilation of the Rohingya people. The group, the Arakan Resistance Army, is a small insurgency group that is fighting for the rights of the Rohingya people. They had a few arms. They went and attacked 30 security posts, and in retaliation, the Myanmar government led a counterinsurgency campaign where they annihilated hundreds and thousands of them. And the tricky thing is the Myanmar government is not letting anybody into the country. They're not letting journalists in to actually see how many people are being attacked. But there have been satellite images where you see hundreds of villages that have been demolished. In fact, when I was at the border, I saw with my own eyes villages just burning to ash as like a backdrop, as like little women and children are coming over the Naf River.
Doctor, I want you to talk about what you saw as recently as last October when you were in Bangladesh to try to provide some kind of medical help in the refugee camps where the Rohingya have taken shelter across the border in Bangladesh. you're used to working in hospitals in Canada. I mean, what was it like for you walking in there? What are you seeing? And how do you respond to this kind of trauma and treatment that's needed?
So Margaret, it was very, very overwhelming for me. I saw lots of patients, almost everyone, with severe malnutrition. They were, even I have seen the adults with severe muscle wasting. They were just like walking skeleton. Usually that kind of muscle wasting indicates long-standing starvation. I have seen babies whose mothers could not feed them because they did not have any breast milk. They were starving by themselves. I have seen lots of patients, young children with diarrhea due to lack of clean water, poor sanitation. Lots of patients with, children were sick, very sick, dying with simple chest infections. I did not have good and strong antibiotics to treat them. Another important thing as a medical doctor that I found very strange, it was very strange to me, the illnesses like polio and diphtheria and many other illnesses, they are long gone. I have not seen, working as a doctor in my medical career, any patients with polio. But because we have good vaccines, we have good effective vaccines against it, so we don't see those patients. I have read only in my textbook. But those poor Rohingya people, they are still suffering from these deadly illnesses because they did not have any access to health care there for years and years. So I was kind of learning about these polio and these diphtheria. I have seen lots of patients with tuberculosis. So one patient I saw there, I stopped by on my way back from the medical camp, I saw that his legs were a little bit abnormal. So I was just seeing—
A little boy.
Little boy. So I stopped there and I looked around for his parents. So a man came out of the tent and he told me that he's his neighbor. So he found the young 4 or 5-year-old boy wandering in the jungle in between the trees for 4 days after his parents' whole family was killed. So he was almost starving. So his neighbor found him when he was coming to Bangladesh. So he brought him, and he told me that when he found the boy, he was holding tight on a small plastic shopping bag. So he looked inside that what he was carrying. There was clothes of his mother and sister who were dead like 4 days ago. So it just breaks your heart. And this is like one of the many stories that I have seen, all heart-wrenching.
What made you leave a hospital in Canada, working in relative safety, to go and put yourself at risk, something you clearly feel very emotionally invested in? What made you do this?
So Margaret, first of all, there is obviously human element to it. I don't know how any person, any doctor, any woman can hear all these stories of rape and massacres and not being affected somehow. Another important factor are my patients. The area where I'm living in Canada has seen large number of Syrian refugees over the past few years. And being a doctor, quite a few of them ended up being my patients. And they have told me what they have gone through. They have told me how they got to Canada, like from Eastern Europe, from Africa, from Turkey. Those patients who were not harmed physically, I can still see the trauma in them, especially my younger patients. That's what conflict does. That's what civil war does. It just scars you emotionally for the rest of their life. Like when you are speaking to a 12-year-old boy who has seen literally their whole family killed in front of him, it just breaks your heart. So the final thing that led to this trip was a request from ICNA Relief Canada. They asked me to go there and do the medical assessment needs because they were working on them, they were providing shelters, and they heard that there are lots of pregnant women and no doctor there. So I went there in the refugee camps in Bangladesh back in October last year. When I went there, I saw many, many people living in a very, very poor condition. I thought, and I talked to myself, I said that I have to do something, whatever I could, to make their life a little bit easier for them, because it was quite obvious to me that they are not going anywhere anytime soon.
And Tania, how did you come to report on this? You're Bangladeshi American. How is it that you decided to go into these camps and tell the story? Why did you feel personally invested?
The Rohingyas have been persecuted far long before this mass exodus happened. I was particularly alarmed by a story on the Bangladeshi government's plan to move the Rohingyas to a remote island because there were a group of them that had already fled because of the violence from the Myanmar government. And I visited this remote island called Tengachor, and it's an island that's underwater half of the year. And it turns out that with the current repatriation that is set to take place, that the Bangladeshi government still wants to send the Rohingya people to this remote island. So that's kind of what sparked my interest, is why do they not have a home? The fact that the Myanmar government does not recognize them as citizens, do not allow them to marry, do not give them permission to have movement. They live in a prison in the Rakhine state, and now they're just being pushed out. That was my initial passion to cover this story.
Now, you and your cameraman have taken some pretty extraordinary photos, and I think on the screen behind me you've seen some of those cycle through, but I want to take a moment now to show some particular ones. When you look at those images, do you think that that story and those pictures is understood outside of Bangladesh?
I don't know that it is. I think when you're there, I mean, as a journalist, I've been to the Democratic Republic of Congo. I've covered conflict, but I have never seen something this horrific in my life. To see scores of children by themselves. Over 20,000 of the refugees fleeing the Myanmar border into Bangladesh are children. They're by themselves, witnessing their parents getting hacked to death in front of them. That's just something, there's no words for it.
You're going back tomorrow to the region.
I am.
What part of the story are you going to tell now? The majority of the people that are suffering right now and the stories that are not being told are about the women and children. You see, I have a big passion for the Me Too movement. But our sisters in Bangladesh are suffering right now. They're suffering from being raped, systematically raped, and horrendously abused. So I'm going back there to shed light on them and their stories because they don't have a voice. And that's what needs to be done right now, and that's actually my goal. And Dr. Alvi, you mentioned that a lot of the resources that you need to treat some of these symptoms and diseases you're seeing, you simply don't have. What is it like in those camps?
In these camps, I have met lots of people, heard lots of stories, each so devastating. We did not want to ask those stories, but incidentally, when we're talking about the history, we ended up getting those stories. So one of the there are some stories that are just stuck with me. This first story is of a girl, I don't know her name. It's a small girl. One day, I was coming out of the medical camp. At the end of the day, on the outskirts of the camps, we stopped at the tent, and we went inside. There were 2 women inside. They started talking with us, and they started telling us their story, that how they were kept for 15 days, and they were raped, continuously raped by different people, and how their babies were burned, how their husbands were killed. So once we were talking to them, I noticed a small girl, almost the same age as my 12-year-old daughter. She was sitting on the back in the dark and quietly crying that we did not notice her first. When I saw her, when I saw her face, her tears, she was listening how her baby brother was burned alive in the fire, how her dad was killed, how her mom was raped. My heart sank and I just felt paralyzed. I did not have any words for her. So that girl tears and her face still haunts me. And I think I will never recover from it. This is one of the many stories that I witnessed from my eyes. Another story that got stuck with me was the woman her name is Rashida. She came to the medical camps one day, and she was not eating, she was not sleeping, she was looking very weak to me. And I did her physical examination. There was nothing wrong with her. All the vitals were good. So I asked her, what's wrong with you? Then she told me her story, that one day back in August, when this horrific campaign of violence started, led by Burmese army, that Burmese soldiers came to her village and they started burning the houses, started burning their markets, and they started killing their men and boys. They came to her house while she was holding her 6-day-old infant. Her husband was close by, so they killed her husband with a machete. They cut his throat in front of her. And then they grabbed her 6-day-old baby and threw the baby on the ground first, and then in the fire, right in front of her eyes, the baby that she has given birth just like less than a week ago. Rashida was struggling. She was held back by the soldiers. After all of that, she was taken with her 12-year-old daughter by the soldiers to a nearby house with some other women. And they were blindfolded with a scarf, and their clothes were taken off, and the soldiers started to rape them. After the rape, whoever was still breathing was beaten, was shot. So Rashida has a wound on her head. She had a bloody head, and her jaw was broken. She went unconscious for a bit with pain. When she woke up, her daughter was dead already. All the women in the room were dead, and the house was ablaze. Another woman and Rashida, who were still alive, they made a hole in the wall to come out of the house naked. They got clothes from some of the people in their village, and then they accompanied them to the Bangladesh refugee camps where I met her. So this is one of the many stories I heard. All of the stories, they were almost the same. It just breaks your heart. Another story that I want to mention about a pregnant woman. A woman told me that when she was fleeing from her village on the way to Bangladesh, they were stopped by a few soldiers on the way. And one of the women in their group was heavily pregnant. So she went into labor and she collapsed on the ground. And a soldier walked up to her and started kicking her stomach while she was giving birth. And the other soldiers, they pointed guns on the rest of the women so that nobody could help her. They were laughing, they were making jokes. The callousness of the cruelty really hit me. No sane person can look at pregnant woman and even contemplates of hitting her womb while she's giving birth. It's like Burmese soldiers, they have completely dehumanized these human beings. They don't see them as human beings. They see them as another statistic they have to check off. There are lots of stories. I can sit here all night, but because our time is limited, if our time allows, I have a couple of other stories I would love to share.
It is hard to, in any way, envision how what you described could get any worse. But I know monsoon season is right around the corner, and you're very concerned about what is going to happen. Tell us why.
So monsoon season, the area which I have seen where they are living in Cox's Bazar, is a small strip right by the ocean.
Cox's Bazar is where the refugee camps are.
Where the refugee camps are. So that area is a direct hit of landslide and flooding every monsoon season, and is coming in within the next couple of months. And they have estimated that almost 1/3 of the dwelling, their camps, are going to be swept away with the monsoon season. Those people have suffered a lot in their life. They have gone through hell. So international community have to come together and do some things about these people, because they have gone through a hard time already, and they are counting on us. It's a massive effort. We have to do a massive effort. All the international community, they need to come out. So we have made these institutions like UN, EU, United Nations, International Criminal Court, to make people accountable, to maintain peace. But I'm sorry to say they have done very little in response to this genocide.
They're recognizing it as ethnic cleansing, but you're saying they're not doing anything to stop it? The agreement so far, you think?
They are just recognizing it. It's just we need to make a massive effort. These people who are in Bangladesh, they are in danger now. And those people who are back in Rakhine State, they are also starving. Their condition is very bad too. So we need to help up. It just need a telephone call just to stop that.
Tania, and I want you as well to weigh in on this. It's now recognized as ethnic cleansing by the US government as well. Today here in Washington, there was some news when the Holocaust Museum revoked a human rights award that it had given to Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, who is one of the leaders of Myanmar, or Burma, alongside still the military-controlled government in many ways. But she has taken the brunt of the criticism because she has failed to speak out for the Rohingya people, because she has become such an international icon. Do you think that doing things like taking away that award from her achieves something? I mean, is this a way to get any of this noticed?
There aren't any sanctions being put on by the United Nations regarding the Rohingya crisis. Yes, it has been recognized as ethnic cleansing, but from my experience, from the interviews I have given, have had with high officials, I foresee that this is a genocide, and it's horrendous. I don't think just taking an award from her is enough. I don't understand how she wakes up in the morning with blood on her hands. I think that more needs to be done. In fact, hundreds of Rohingyas are fleeing from Myanmar today, every week, into Bangladesh. Nobody's talking about that, or the fact that there's a systematic starvation going on. They first terrorized them, gang raped them, mutilated them, and now they're being starved to death so that they'll flee. And then it's contradictory, because then the Myanmar government is trying to send them into back to Myanmar, into these repatriation camps, which, in my opinion, are internment camps. And who would want to go back to their abuser is my question. So no, enough is not absolutely being done.
Dr. Alvi, what do you need to see happen?
So, first of all, as Tania said, that taking the award away from Aung San Suu Kyi is not enough for us. She is the head of the state of a country which is engaged in active genocide, and she has done not only nothing, but she's trying to cover it up and calling it fake news. So,
and the excuse is often given, well, she doesn't truly have control, that it's really the military, and you are challenging that.
I'm challenging that because the reason she has been silent, she has said nothing. She has betrayed all the democratic ideals that she stood for. She is trying to hide it, she's trying to cover it up, she's helping them to cover it up. It shows that she is complicit in it. So I urge everybody to contact their local congressmen, to contact their government officials, to condemn Aung San Suu Kyi and her military government, and to impose economic and military sanctions of Burma. Unless we do not address the root causes, this problem is not going to solve. We have to address that culture of impunity that has allowed Burmese army to get away with this kind of action, what the UN called textbook example of ethnic cleansing. We have to address that culture. We have to address the root causes. There is no point of sending these people back to Burma, Myanmar. It's like sending them back to their deaths. Who is going to ensure their safety? That very military government who has done systematic rape of their women, who has burned their babies alive, who has burned their houses, who has given the parents an option to either save their loved ones from the fire or run away with those ones who are still alive. There is no point of talking about sending those people back unless we address the root causes. And she's the head of the state in the country where there's active genocide going on.
She's the de facto leader.
Thank you for telling us all of what you've witnessed and for keeping this story in front of all of us. Thank you.